Very official, everything. Hello, hello. And very, very Swiss, incredibly punctual, 7 o'clock sharp. Wow. Well, welcome everybody to our first gallery talk in the long history of the gallery. We opened, as most of you know, not too long ago in the summer. So this is very special for me and us. And it's a great pleasure that it is happening with two friends of mine, first and foremost, who also happen to be, as I think, the most brilliant ones in their own field, in their respective fields. The wonderful Jessie Makinson and Katy Hessel. Applause. Just very quickly, I'm trying to be short, which is always difficult for me, but just run you quickly through the course of the evening. We are having this talk now, obviously. I'm just going to say a few things about the speakers, and they're going to speak with each other, be in discussion for about 40 minutes. 35-40 minutes, and afterwards they kindly offered to take questions. So that would be for about 20 minutes. Following that, we will mingle, have drinks, celebrate, and cheers to the new year and to the launch of the catalog, which we worked very hard on. You can see there the entrance. It arrived today at about 2 in the afternoon from London. So I was sweating that this would be here in time. And this catalog is special for many reasons. I'm going to get into maybe a little bit later in more detail as well after the talk, but also the wonderful curator Marie-Charlotte Carrier has written a wonderful essay for the catalog, and she's also here tonight, and I'm going to say one or two things about her also afterwards. And Jessie might sign one or two of them for you. And then we'll have, drinks and food. So I just want to say that how grateful I am to Jessie and Katy for both being here. For me, it's something that is long time coming, and I'm very excited about, particularly also in relation to how this show came about. I'm sure most of you know Jessie's works. If not, have a look around. But maybe less so about her or her practice. This is something that Katy and them are going to get unravel and talk about, and maybe other things as well. So this is Jessie has become part now of my story as well, which is really truly something wonderful for me, because it is kind of the reason, she's kind of the reason why I guess it was sort of the dot on the I, as we say in German, of why I felt confident and secure enough to become a gallerist and to open this gallery, which was very much related to the discovery, or my discovery, of her work. So just quickly about that, I saw her work first at the Royal College, at the Royal Drawing School in 2014. Where she just had won the Sir Denis Mahoon Award. And I remember this still very, very well to this day, of how excited I was when I saw her work for the first time. Much more excited than I think I was ever really before when confronted with an artwork or with art. There were dozens of daunting worlds of images full of stories and perspectives that opened up in front of me. and I responded to them enthusiastically and almost euphorically. We spent a lot of time in that exhibition, getting to know each other, discussing the work. Certainly, as I said before, my conviction to do what I do now, what I want to do, has hardened with that discovery, because it was something that I felt I definitely want to be connected with. I felt like I had found something that corresponded to the essence of quality, the richness in form and content, vision, joy, depth, density, passion, grandeur, courage and playfulness that I, as a gallerist, feel like I want to advocate. We had just a little side story. We had this show in 9B, a project space I run next to the job I had before at Victoria Miro. And how people reacted to this show was literally, as I said before, this last puzzle piece, where I felt like, it's not just me finding this great, but many others. So I could trust my gut instinct, I guess, and my calling to be a gallerist, which is related to discovering works and nurture them, nurture artists and promote them, and on a long-lasting basis. And so where am I? In relation to Jessie's works, maybe just quickly, the content will surely be unraveled in more detail shortly, but it's about stories, and I love stories. I like to tell stories. Sometimes they're good or bad, maybe they're sometimes too long, but I certainly also love listening to them. And I have a great passion for that from my early age on. If my father told me stories when I was younger, or read stories to me, or gave me books to read until this day, actually. Or listening to stories from people that I admire. And Jessie is certainly one of the great storytellers for me, not telling a story in words, but telling it with images. And in today's time, I think I have a feeling, it also happens to me, we tell less and less stories, or we have less and less time to listen to stories, or we maybe have not so many great narrators anymore, and I think I miss that. And in regards to Jessie's work, it's not just a particular story that she tells, but her images are rather worlds and cosmologies that offer us the elements needed to piece our own narratives together. So we have to ignite them with our own input. And I think I'm going on maybe for a little bit too long, but I really want to say something about Katy now as well. I'm trying to cut it short, but not too short, because Katy is also very, very dear to me, and it's equally wonderful that she's here with us tonight and with me, because Katy and I know each other from Victoria Miro from many, many years ago, where Katy used to be an intern. Young, still very young, but at the time she was this fresh of breath air at Victoria Miro that came in like a whirlwind, asked so many questions, was really excited, and but you could tell that there was, you were just very eager, but you had this sort of really genuine charm and likability about yourself that, made you loved by everybody very quickly. And I think for myself, I can certainly say that I saw I guess, a star or a somebody great in the making. And I think I think back of those days very fondly. It's incredible to see what Katy made from her time there and out of herself. And it wasn't just that she climbed the ladder of success and greatness at Victoria Miro very quickly, being now in a force in the exhibitions and press team. But she also, her ambition didn't stop there. You took on a few other endeavors. You studied, first of all, you finished that, and you became graduated as an art historian. And you definitely had bigger plans, I think, in the back of your head, which you fulfilled until this day. She's now the brilliant writer, curator and art historian that I felt like you were already, called out to be at the time. Quickly, she's best known for, I'm sure many of you know this by now, the Great Women Artists account on Instagram that celebrates women artists on a daily basis. And she also recently established a podcast of the same name, called The Great Women Artist, which was listed as British Vogue's best podcast of 2019. So it's eine Minute, as we say in Swiss German. Her youthful, fresh way, she produces smart, fun, and accessible content, readdressing the gender imbalance in the art world by reinserting women of all backgrounds back into the canon of art history. I think she delivers that ingeniously through a medium that might be connected to more, superficiality like Instagram, but she's using it so smartly to reach and educate a wider audience. And I find that very necessary, Katy, and I find that great. And you have a very sharp and keen eye for the zeitgeist and what today wants and needs. I have a total long list of other things that you did and wrote about: Tate Gallery, Tate Modern, Barbican, curated shows, Palazzo Monti, a residency she does, the owner or... I guess the owner of that is also here with us tonight, Eduardo. So, and I hope, but maybe I'm not quite right, it's kind of maybe the first talk you're doing outside of the UK, which is very, very exciting and special for us. So you're in here for a treat. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over the microphone to Katy and Jessie.
Thank you so much, Fabian, and thank you all so much for coming and being here tonight. I'm absolutely delighted to see so many people. Of course, Jessie will bring a big crowd, but it's such an honour to be in conversation with Jessie, who I have been such a big fan of for such a long time. I think it was your 2017 City and Guild show that I first saw your work, and since then I've been so intrigued, but also just to see her work grow. I mean, we look around at this insanely brilliant exhibition and we have wall drawings, screens, drawings, paintings. The evolution is so exciting. And I think what really fascinated me about your work initially was this ambiguity and what is beneath these surfaces and why are these characters in this strange place. And that's why I'm so excited to kind of unravel this tonight. Like you said earlier, you get the sense of euphoria, I think, when you see Jessie's work. I think that's a wonderful way to describe it. So I'd firstly just love to ask you the title of this exhibition, Nobody Asked You To. Tell us about its originations.
Hello. The title is taken from a book called The Female Man by Joanna Russ, and I get a lot of titles by taking notes when I'm reading or misunderstanding what people say or general conversations or anything. And I had written Nobody Asked You To down in my notes, and it initially was the title for that painting over there. And I quickly came to see it as the title for the whole show. When Marie Charlotte was writing the essay for the catalogue, she reminded me of the kind of context that it came from the book, because I take a lot of notes kind of out of context. I'm kind of into the idea of misunderstanding things or taking things out of context. And one of the characters in the book says, "I wouldn't be a man for all the world," and the other character says, "Well, nobody asked you to." And that in itself kind of sounds a bit more aggressive than perhaps I would mean, but what I like about it is the kind of the nonchalance of it, of like, well, do what you like, you know, it doesn't matter, why are you even talking about it? I quite like that kind of shrug. And I think it's a very strong sounding title, and my last show in Mexico was called Tender Trick, and I kind of see titles as an opportunity to build up layers of ideas, and so that they have kind of a different feeling with each show or with each work. And I see them kind of as an opportunity to sometimes to troll a painting in a way, to make fun out of it, to not I don't really like a title to describe a painting. I'd like it to be playful and kind of to add another layer. So that painting over there at the back is called Watch Your Tail. And I kind of like the idea that, you know, watch out, your tail's stuck in the door, or like someone might step on it, and how nice it would be to have a really silky tail, or like if it just, in that case, it has a head on the end of it. But it's not really a problem, you know, I quite like that attitude. Yeah.
Definitely. And when did you first hear about this text, The Female Man, and why did you want to sort of pursue it?
Well, I've always been interested in kind of fantasy and speculative fiction. Growing up, I read a lot of that kind of thing. I suppose the most famous female speculative fiction writer is like Margaret Atwood. And a few years ago, I read The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin, and she's just such an amazing feminist writer, and the way she talks about gender is so exciting. And so it kind of led me to research more feminist sci-fi writers, because, you know, obviously lots of the male writers wrote amazing books, but the themes and things are relatively familiar or known, and other things that are in films and stuff. And some of the people like Octavia Butler and Ursula Le Guin and Joanna Russ, they're kind of themes that feel so contemporary, and you're just so shocked that they were written so long ago. And so, yeah, that's kind of why I'm reading that sort of thing.
No, it's so interesting. I think, you know, what you were saying earlier about these works having this narrative through them. And I think what I love about your work and what I've been doing for so long is kind of projecting my own narrative onto them. And it's I love this ambiguity to them, because they can kind of be anything. And I'd love to sort of start off by talking about the setting of these works, because in your OMR show there was a beautiful text, and it started off with a quote from Anne Barton's The Shakespearean Forest, which said, "Forests are places of transformations where the boundary between human life and that of animals, plants or trees are likely to become confused or even obliterated." And I think your works really echo this idea of transformational ambiguity. And I'd love to start off by asking you about why, and I also think that the settings are just as important as the characters. Why do you like to, what is it about forests that fascinate you?
Well, I first became interested in forests, I suppose, from reading, I don't know if you read Italo Calvino's Castle of Crossed Destinies.
No.
It's kind of an odd book that doesn't really work, but it tells the story of people who've travelled through this forest, and they've all travelled through it through a period of time, and they get to this castle, and they've lost the power of speech, and they decide that the way to tell their story would be through tarot cards. So they each take it in turns to tell the story with the symbols of the cards. And so there's these layers of meaning that kind of all interlink, and the story kind of gets all messed up because there's no straight lines in a forest, and all these characters have had to make decisions and met other weird characters. And it's just a really great idea that the book is kind of strange, but So that's where I first became interested in the forest. And I suppose I'm interested in the history of the forest, and historically, you know, a lot of the world was covered in kind of really dense rainforest, and that's where humans lived for a very long time, kind of pre-agriculture. And I think it's interesting that people maybe wouldn't see the sky sometimes. It would be really kind of dense, and you would... And I'm interested in the period of when people started to make clearings, and the move to kind of settled spaces and agriculture, and how that kind of made a change a lot of the time from more matriarchal societies to patriarchal societies.
Yeah.
And I suppose it all kind of links in together. And there's also this other book that I read at the time I was making these paintings called The Vor by Brian Catling. He's an artist. I mean, there's some dodgy sort of things going on in the book, but it's kind of set in a mythical town in Africa on the edge of this huge forest called the Vor. And there's this man who... The book opens with this man who makes a bow and arrow from the body of his dead wife, which is sort of a bit questionable, but you kind of really believe it. And he shoots an arrow into the forest, and he knows where to go, just somehow, and follows it. And I'm interested in the kind of the idea that outlaws and heroes and dangerous people, and, you know, Robin Hood is a kind of villain and a hero, and I kind of like you know, the idea of a highwaywoman, and kind of gangs of women.
What is it about kind of matriarchal societies or matriarchal environments that intrigue you? Because you mentioned earlier about there is this history of matriarchal environments.
I suppose I'm interested in a kind of like I'm not trying to create matriarchal societies in my paintings. I'm just interested in a different way of thinking about something, I suppose. Do
you think there is a feminist angle to your work?
I mean, for sure. I mean, it's that they are all women. I think they mainly, and I think they're very based in kind of historical painting. And I think as soon as if you had a man in the painting, it becomes about the relationship between power, between the men and the women in the painting. So I think if you kind of take them out, you're allowed to it changes the conversation slightly, I think. And you can think about different things.
And I loved in Marie Charlotte's text, she mentioned that they're, you know, how... I guess when you look at these creatures, they seem sort of half animal, half human. And if anything, women particularly, and animals, you know, they are sort of the more oppressed people in society. Can you sort of expand on the fact why you almost make these creatures animalistic and why they are ambiguous, or is it just organic?
I mean, it is very organic from the process with which I make the paintings. I kind of find the narrative and things happen, and, you know, I'll be trying to draw an ear or something and it's not working, so I'll just think, does she need an ear? You know, and just change it to something else. It just I'm interested in, not exactly in transformation, but kind of flexibility and possibility. Does it really matter if something kind of flips its shape for a while? This painting reminded me a lot, when I was making it, of this is called Listen Sweetie, of Orlando, which is obviously like an incredible transformation story. What was your question about animals?
Yeah, about why you sort of like to, you know, fuse women and animals.
I think I don't normally talk about this because everyone always rolls their eyes, but
we're here to listen.
I think since I became like vegan a few years ago, and
absolutely fair enough.
Yeah, I think it was initially for environmental reasons, but the flip in your like mind that happens about the relationship between humans and animals is kind of something that is irreversible, and I kind of think, like lots of people would say, why do you care about animals when there's people suffering? And as far as I'm concerned, like, if you care about the planet and the animals that you share it with, it's a kind of from the bottom up kind of thing. And I think the nature of the forest is very reciprocal. It's like give and take. You let things go and things come back to you. I mean, it's an imaginary forest, but
Yeah.
because there's certainly not many forests left in the UK, I don't think.
No.
Burnt them all down, chopped them all down.
No, there is this definite, you mentioned it earlier, Fabian, but this sort of zeitgeisty, it feels very present, your work, even just with what we've been seeing in the news. I mean, I know that your work isn't really about this, but, actually how many of these spaces do we have left in the world? And are we actually seeing women and animals, or people and animals, just running free in these spaces?
Yeah, I mean, like you said about, so many kind of people that aren't straight white men have been, animals and people and women and people of colour and stuff. It's very easy there's a relationship between the discrimination of animals and people and the planet. And there is a reason we're in this climate crisis, I suppose. And some people would say the patriarchy's to blame, I suppose. But
And do you feel that even though there is this, I guess they all, like you're saying, that they are animals and women in one place, but do you feel that there is some kind of hierarchy in the works? Because, I mean, when I look at them, I feel like it is this kind of battleground, and there are people who are sort of winning or people who are in better positions than others.
It's funny because people do see it that way, but I don't really think like she's got all her guts out, but I feel like she's having an all right time about it. There is a kind of goriness, but I like the flexibility between the space and the animals and the figures and the plants. Like they're all made up of this same substance, this kind of underdrawing that I do. So they're kind of they're interchangeable. I like a kind of courtly setting where I try not to have a hierarchy, I suppose. I mean, the most rendered thing is normally the faces or the hands. The hands are the only thing that I do from like a photograph, just to not be lazy, really.
Oh, well, so you'll actually get a picture of hands and copy them?
Yeah, they're all my hands.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting.
Witchy hands.
Because for me, I mean, your work, I know you studied at the Royal Drawing School, but when I look at these works, I mean, they almost feel like they have an almost quite Renaissance or Baroque feel to them. They're sort of narrative, but not, they're sort of unknowingly narrative. But I mean, what immediately comes to mind is someone like Caravaggio's Medusa, which is so loaded and powerful, and again, it has that kind of cross between the woman and the snake and all this stuff. Do you look at historical painters much?
Well, I spent a lot of time at the drawing school drawing in the National Gallery from historical painting. So, like a year of doing that really kind of embeds the language in your mind. When I made that painting over there, I was thinking a little bit about Bruegel, I suppose, which is telling, but I wasn't looking at a Bruegel painting. It's kind of in my mind. And I'm now working on a body of paintings where I'm thinking about Flemish kitchen scenes.
Okay. So bit of a detour.
Yeah. So I don't know how they're going to turn out.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. I love the fact that you're, playing with the everyday. You have these, I mean, what's fantastic when you look at Jessie's work is that there are just so many things going on. I mean, you don't even notice the house at first. You don't even notice what's behind that. And I think that's what's so exciting about it. And what do you kind of want people to focus on first? Where does the sort of story start in these pieces?
I can't really tell, but because I know like every millimetre of the painting, but I think people are maybe drawn to the faces first and it kind of drifts out and back. And as a child, I just always liked paintings that you could look at for ages and find things, but they take time and energy to look at, I suppose. So not everybody would have the patience for it. I mean, my main concern when I'm painting is like interlocking shapes and colour and pattern. And the story is something that I look at kind of from the corner of my eye. I don't think about it directly. It's almost like a clothes hanger for everything else. It's not my first thought.
Yeah, I think it's just probably as a viewer and as an art historian, it's easy to kind of project a narrative on something because it is figurative in a way. But I think it's just the sort of sheer joy of being an art historian and being able to make up something. I think you can do an abstract painting, which kind of brings me to your process. Because I mean, we're surrounded by wall drawings, and how do these wall drawings inform what we're seeing? What is the kind of process behind all these paintings?
So all the paintings start with this wall drawing. So underneath every painting there is this kind of pattern that I make with pure pigment and dispersant, and you kind of can see it here. So I'll make this wall drawing, and I'll step back and look at it and look at the shapes to see where I can find figures and where spatial relationships can emerge, and it kind of helps me. If I were to plan it, it could be really, really stiff, and it helps me place things in front of each other, actually, because like if I'd planned this all out, I might not think to put that plant there or something, for example. And I forgot what I was saying.
So the figures are really kind of born out of these abstract, slightly random shapes.
Yeah, they're found, and I'm always trying to generate scenarios in which to surprise myself or access my subconscious or work intuitively, to not be cliched or to sometimes be extremely cliched on purpose, to like take it too far in a way, in sort of what's almost really obvious.
And how did you first kind of develop that technique? Because I think it's quite unusual.
Well, I was at this art school called Terps Banana, and they were always complaining that my paintings were too tight. And I thought I would just make a mess underneath and then cover it up. And that was like my problem-solving way around the problem, just to find like a backdoor kind of cheat to the problem. But I think a lot of people work like that. There's no way you can be messier than you are, really.
Yeah.
You know, you have a personal logic as an artist.
Because in a way, there's so much kind of orderly chaos in them, but I mean that in the best possible way. And what I love about is actually seeing the paintings in the flesh as well, is just kind of, if you look up close, even, I'm just looking at this woman here, in a way she could be enjoying herself, or she could be about to be killed or something. And the fact that she does have this paint splattered on her makes me think it's blood, or there is this kind of battle element to it. So I think it is also really surprising for the viewers as well. And then is it that you kind of create these shapes, and then you kind of work into the faces, and then you kind of discover who the characters are?
Yeah, so the whole surface will be painted like the wall is, and then I will probably draw a kind of linear outline of the figures. Not everything will be drawn in. And then I put washes of colour on, like this kind of blue, green, and then the faces will come in, characters will change. They kind of start in one corner and grow out, and each thing that's added changes the narrative, and it's a kind of push and pull, give and take. There's a lot of no's, like things don't work, or they're too obvious, or they're not quite right. I mean, this painting is like a rare one where I had like an idea for it. I think I was reading about this King James I, how he liked to go on the hunt in the forest, and he would kill a big stag, and then he would get all his servants to cut open the stag and lift him and dip his feet in the blood, and he liked it because it was really warm and gave him loads of power. So I thought that was like quite a funny blood ritual anyway.
And then I guess what's fascinating as well is, I mean, when I look at your work, and there's a fantastic artist who's based in London called Lisa Bryce, who I know you're a fan of as well. And I got sort of thinking about both of your works because you do have these incredibly kind of powerful matriarchal figures. I mean, completely different styles. But Lisa also works with drawing, and she kind of maps out her characters in drawings. And I'm intrigued to know if you do get these recurring, because obviously the faces, they do look similar in a way. Are you getting with what surround us, are you repeating characters into the paintings, and do you kind of does it surprise yourself that you end up painting the same figure, or maybe they're all different?
They're not individual characters that pop up in different paintings. I think that they are, they're not individual characters, and they all look a bit similar, probably because I'm making them up. So they kind of are all kind of very, very similar. But quite often they'll look like someone I know or I've just spoken to, or
we're all going to be it next. Fabian in one of them. Women, Fabian.
You said you would wear a wig. So I kind of see them as they're individuals, but they're part of a group, so that they're not they're in their own worlds, but they're not really individuals. They're part of a kind of gang. And I like hearing about, historically, have you heard of Alice Diamond?
No.
Alice Diamond was in Elephant and Castle at the turn of the 20th century, and she was the leader of this all-female gang called Alice Diamond and the 40 Elephants.
Oh,
have you
God,
heard?
Yeah, I think I've heard of them.
And they were just like really tall and well-dressed, and liked to have fights and stuff. And people would say that they were like suffragettes, but they weren't, because when the kind of suffragette marches were happening, they would go and rob like department stores and stuff. And I like that they just didn't really give a shit and were just doing their own thing, and just part of this kind of gang.
Yeah.
So I kind of see them a bit like that, maybe.
And I guess what is unique to every painting, or maybe not, I don't know, but we'll have to find out, is that they all have a very distinct colour palette to them. I'm intrigued, are you working on them all at the same time, or are you kind of, I mean, if you look at that colour palette compared to this one and compared to that one, they seem like their own worlds, although they're part of the same world. Because of the colour, they're very distinctly separate.
I try and have an individual colour palette for each, but the shadows are always green, really. So that kind of links them. But, I mean, the colours are weird. Some people hate it. Some people love it. They're kind of awkward. I do a lot of stupid stuff, like put red in the shadows like you're not supposed to. And because,
why aren't you supposed to?
I don't know. I think you're supposed to have like cool colours in the shadows. And because the figures are the same colours as the background, they have this in and out popping feel. So I have to use kind of pattern to separate things. And I think it comes a lot from looking at early Renaissance painting and Persian miniatures and things like that. This kind of colour blocking together. They kind of fit in like jigsaws.
Yeah.
Because I don't paint a kind of brown all over thing and then work into it. It's like section by section, shape by shape, kind of clicking in.
And earlier you mentioned the underlay. Is that also, so for example, would that be much more purple? The underlay of that, would this be much more green? Or does it all start out as the same thing?
Well, there's this that goes on, and then I put washes of colour. So the washes of colour might be more purple in that one. And then obviously, because if I don't put this under thing on, things can be quite stiff, and they are a bit stiff anyway, but things don't kind of sink into the environment as well. And you don't get this kind of weird patterning on the bodies, which very easily looks like kind of shadows in the woods or whatever.
I think what's interesting is your use of dark colours as well, because I think once you start concentrating on the really kind of block, dark, really midnight blue colours, it actually changes the spatial awareness so much. I love painting that can really, once you notice something, it can completely change up. And in a way, it's quite abstract. Can you talk a bit about the way that you apply colour and why?
Yeah, I think I kind of do see them as abstract paintings, which is obviously ridiculous to say. Why do I apply? Well, the colour's just very intuitive for me, and if the colour's wrong, I can't continue with the painting, and it is led by the stuff that's going on underneath. And I don't know. I think it's just very intuitive, really.
And then, because you have something like a screen, which we see behind us here, which is black and white, and in a way, it's so different. You're not in you are in a forest, but you're not in this world anymore. Can you talk about why you like sort of working on the screen, the colours that you work on it, and the kind of evolution of how you've started working on it?
Well, I first started working in black and white, making some kind of fake Greek vases. So
yes.
I have these black and white ceramics, and they do look kind of Greekish. I'm interested in fakes and misunderstandings and paranoia and stuff like that. And so as soon as I took that language and put it onto the screen, it changed, because that doesn't look like a Greek screen anymore. It looks kind of like a period of kind of design that was influenced by Japan and China, I suppose. It has that kind of feel to it.
Art Nouveau almost.
Yeah. And I'm interested in how, when a language is on a different surface, how it can change its meaning, and which is why I like to make wallpapers and stuff like that. And something I really want to do is to work in a room and to make the skirting board and the door handles and all the furniture, and it all to be kind of a continuation of the story across different surfaces.
Because in your OMR show last summer, you actually created a house.
Yeah, and the house looks a bit like a kind of weird tissue box or something. It doesn't have quite the same feel as the screen. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to making more things like that.
And you mentioned earlier about Greek mythology. I would love to sort of know a bit more about why that is important to your practice. Is it also the stories of Greek mythology that fascinate you?
I actually don't know that much about mythology. I think the paintings that they reference are, the subject matter of those paintings is obviously mythology, and as soon as you have naked women running around outside, it suggests mythology. But I am interested in the way women are represented in mythology, and I read in one of Marina Warner's essays about the idea of the kalon kakon, which means beautiful evil, and it was used to describe Pandora, and is obviously a kind of, Pandora is a precursor to Eve, and the idea that women are beautiful and evil, not to be trusted, and is infiltrated our culture through kind of Christianity and everything. Homer, there's so many rapes in Homer, and the woman's to blame all the time, and it's just, and those are like stories we see as the original stories.
Yeah.
So, but they're not. Obviously, there were stories before then, and they're very like post-agriculture stories, I suppose. But they're brilliant stories, and there's powerful women in there, and but I couldn't tell you a Greek story, probably. I mean, I could, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think it's fascinating. And the fact that you do work on so many mediums, why do you choose to, for example, in this show, why did you want to just work on paintings and screens as well?
Well, I needed to have some paintings for Fabian. I kind of wanted to, I was thinking initially about doing a kind of fake museum, but that didn't really turn out right. So I was thinking a lot, expanding upon the OMR show, of a sense of adventure, like you mentioned, and a kind of period of painting. And then I wanted to take the opportunity to do a wall drawing. I was supposed to do one in Mexico, but it didn't look quite right, so we didn't do it. And so I was really glad to have had the opportunity to do that here, and that it is actually part of my process as well.
I'm intrigued as well with the kind of sense of place, because obviously you have shown, what's funny is that you haven't had a solo exhibition, or a sort of proper solo exhibition in London yet.
No.
And it's interesting thinking that you are a London painter and you also studied here, which obviously must be somehow ingrained in yourself in a way, your artistic style. But I'm intrigued that you have shown in Mexico, and when I look at your work, I do think of the Mexican surrealists. I think of Leonora Carrington, Leonor Feeney, who wasn't Mexican but was sort of associated with them. And I'm intrigued about how your sense of place informs actually creating the exhibition, because obviously this is such a new gallery. Did you visit the gallery before, and what was your takes on it? What was your kind of vision for it when you first came?
I did visit the gallery, but I didn't really think much about the paintings being for here. I think they're kind of seasonal. That's quite a Christmas painting from my point of view.
It's the waistcoat.
I think it's the sheep. And this is quite autumnal. So, yeah, I just was like expanding on the kind of sense of adventure, really. And now I'm thinking a bit more about world building going forward.
Can you expand on what world building is?
Well, they're kind of leaving the forest now and going into the Flemish kitchen. So I don't know what's going to happen there.
So exciting. And then you've obviously got some fantastic drawings downstairs. And obviously drawing is really, an initial part of your practice. Can you talk about how do the drawings relate to the painting? I mean, you said you don't plan them so much, but can you tell us about the process of the drawings?
Well, I make all sorts of drawings. I make drawings from photographs I collect, and from the underdrawings, I kind of draw sketches to kind of understand the underdrawing. And I make the watercolours that are downstairs, which are just very intuitive and a similar kind of building up from abstract shapes. And I kind of see drawing as a way to the first point of taking something and putting it on paper and getting it out of my head and down, and then from there I can try and make sense of it and develop it. I would never do a drawing and make a painting of it, because I feel like you can never reproduce a drawing in a painting. Like, drawings are as important and shouldn't be, they work because they're on paper or whatever, they don't. I think you lose something if you try and make a painting of a drawing somehow.
Yeah.
For me, anyway.
I think that's interesting. I think we're really lucky here because this room is so generous in the way that it really explains your process in a way. Having these wall drawings surrounding the paintings is so interesting, because it's like, oh, that's the forest that it was first built. But what I love, and I urge you all to go and see the drawings downstairs, is actually, I feel, because a show that I put on a few years ago, you had a painting and a drawing in it. And I loved having both of them, because actually I think the drawings really explain, in a way, for me, the painting process, because just one stroke is a kind of equivalent of the kind of larger strokes in this, but it's done on such a smaller and simpler scale. It's really, really beautiful. And I want to talk to you about the kind of idea of for me, this seems like a kind of Gesamtkunstwerk or something, to be German. And, it is this kind of total work of art. And how do you see all of this kind of come together with the screen, with the paintings, with the wall drawings? How does it all kind of inform each other?
I think they're kind of different entrance points to the world. The drawings, for example, are like less uptight than the paintings. I mean, the paintings are a bit manic, but they're also like got total control freak all over them, like with the organisation and everything. So I think they're just different ways in and different ways of seeing and adding and building, in the same way with the titles,
And what effect do you want people to have when they are surrounded by this kind of world of Jessie Makinson?
Well, I think they can think what they want. That's okay.
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic way to end the conversation, and thank you so much to Jessie.
Thanks, Katy.
And we'd love to open up for any questions that you might have.
Actually, I have a question.
Good.
I spoke to Jessie about that. And I'm curious how this technique of starting abstract and then turning figuratively as a starting point is something... Because I was aware of this being a technique from Max Ernst. I think I read about this, that he did that, particularly later on as a surrealist. because it allowed him to open up a door to almost infinite possibilities. Is that something you looked at, or is that something you study at university? I mean, of course, you looked at Max Ernst and the Surrealists, but also, and that's one question if you looked at that, and also if for you as well, this is a very useful tool to kind of trust this. Open this door of also almost infinite possibilities of going.
Yes, it opens the door. Yeah, I didn't look at Max Ernst and know about that process. I think I saw. I think Ryan Mosley once did a talk at Terps, and he makes these triangles underneath his work, and that helps him as a kind of grid thing. But it really was just making something messy, and just discovered something by cheating, basically. What was your second question?
And the tool for you is to kind of almost something to rely on, to be opening up an infinite amount of possibilities. Because I feel like it's very recognizable, Jess. I mean, your paintings or your works, obviously for me anyway, are very recognizable but they're always very different, and the creatures almost never repeat themselves, and the faces are almost, and the creations of the creatures are all new creatures, and that's something that must come, or I think maybe come from starting abstract, because it didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't think of most of it. You know, if you're sat down to draw and you were told to make something up, it's very, very difficult. Whereas if you have this, it's really naff, but you like seeing in the clouds or whatever, if you start this way, it's very easy to surprise yourself. And so I'm always trying to work kind of autonomously, like the Surrealists, or to trick myself into seeing from round the corner or something.
I think that's what is so fascinating, is that there are not only these kind of limitless creatures, but there are these limitless plants. Or I mean, just this talk, I've kind of been slightly distracted looking at that, the kind of the face on the torso of that house.
It's really bad that I can't remember where that's from, but it's something to do. I think it was.
It's like Humpty Dumpty or something. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's. No, I think there was a guy who was a slave who made all these etchings, and I think that it's really bad that I can't remember that, but I think it's also in Bruegel as well. There's lots of repeat imagery, and I think maybe that landscape at the back there came from Katy's painting of Good and Bad Punishment, which is in Siena, the Lorenzetti fresco. So that's twice removed from originally where it came. And I spent a lot of time in Donegal, so lots of the landscape's really sparse because there's no trees there.
Yeah.
Because the sheep ate all the trees.
Yeah, there was a question over here.
Hi, I'm Xenia. It's the third time I see you painting. Actually, I would like to come back to the point of creatures. It's a question for Jessie. Do you develop any kind of attachment to a particular creature or character in those paintings? And they kind of develop a special character for you somehow, or all of them are sort of abstract as you mentioned? Kind of like that cat very much in that painting, because it's reminiscent. I come from Russia, and it's reminiscent of a character from a very famous Russian novel, a Soviet novel. I just wonder if you have any particular figure you like, a character you like.
I don't know if I'm particularly connected, but I came for the opening of the show and I came back, and it's like being kind of with your friends again in a way. So I feel very kind of connected to them, but I wouldn't say particularly a specific character. I like the rooster over there.
There's no favorite baby, no favorite child.
The rooster, probably. Thanks.
Yeah.
You explained your process very well, and so thanks for that. But when you paint a painting, you do it in one go, or do you do different paintings at once?
One painting in one go. If I stop painting it, I kind of lose the gist of it, and they are quite connected to my life somehow. I couldn't really say how. I mean, everybody's work kind of seeps in, and so I think if I did half of something and came back half a year later, it would just be really confused. It just wouldn't. So everything has to get finished in turn and then kind of shift with the next painting. And then I can't remember how I've made it, so I feel like I'm starting again each time. It's very confusing painting.
Wow.
Do you sleep during a painting?
Not very much. I was going to say.
I sleep about 4 hours a day.
There was a question over here.
So, you spoke to the sort of anamorphic sort of animal, human, hybrid figures as being a kind of getting rid of this hierarchy between animals and humans, but when I saw this, I got this sort of instinctual, animalistic, sexual energy in all these paintings, and I had that feeling that it spoke to the way in which in patriarchal societies women are denied all of these instincts, are sort of supposed to be asexual and refined and proper.
Mm-hmm.
And is that something that goes into your thought process also? Because they're very defiant, they're looking at you while they're sucking each other's fingers.
I'm kind of interested in the characters sort of just doing what they feel like doing and being quite physical with their bodies and expressing themselves with their stances. I mean, nobody really hangs out like this, do they? And I think it probably reflects a lot of the imagery we see on like social media as well. They're kind of posing a lot of front on. Nobody's really from behind. And I kind of like that they're taking the time to not necessarily pose, but to stare out like they don't really care. And yeah, I suppose there is sexual energy there. I don't think about it that much when I'm making them. But they're just very physical figures, I suppose. But they're kind of cold as well. Lots of people find them quite cold. So,
can I ask a follow-up question to that? Are we intruding on their private space at all, or are these public spaces?
I think, I mean, it's different for me to say because I don't want to say what they're doing, but for me they are, it is definitely their space, but it's really irrelevant that someone's seeing them.
Okay, it's not voyeuristic or anything, yeah?
No, I think, I would like it to be that they're just, that I suppose that's the nobody asked you to, this like, so what, you know, none of your business kind of thing. But they are kind of performing at the same time, but not really, just for themselves, maybe. I mean, I'm not really like that.
But there is something definitely theatrical about them as well. I think it comes back to this idea of stories and narrative, and it's interesting you should say it. I hadn't really thought about them posing to us. For me, I saw them as kind of intruding on their private spaces, but there is, again, so many ambiguities.
I think the flatness as well gives it the stage thing as well.
And maybe it's the curtain that I'm just looking at.
Yeah.
I just think it's fantastic.
Well, I quite like if you have like the curtain and then suddenly it's a wing, or it's the language is shifting over different forms. So sometimes there's the veins on a leaf and then it's on the body, or stuff like that. It's not, yeah.
How long are you working on one of these canvases?
What's the answer, Fabian? Like a week, but I can't make one a week. So and they can go wrong and get thrown away and stuff like that. So they have to be made kind of quite quickly. But then some people make a big painting a day, so it's different for everyone, I suppose.
Any more questions? Well, thank you so much, Jessie and Fabian, for hosting us
Katy.
tonight.